Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Rabbi David Levine. It's Erev Shabbat on Friday, August 16, 2024. Shalom, Beth Israel, Mishpocha. I am so glad that we can study and pray together. And I also want to give a warm welcome to our podcast listeners and our international friends tuning in from around the world. We are delighted to have you with us. If you're watching on Facebook, please take a moment and greet us in the comments section. Let us know where you're watching from. It's a great way for us to stay connected with you. And Mishpacha, I want to remind you that we have Shabbat school for our children this Saturday. It's a great time to come to services with your children and grandchildren and worship together as families. Before we begin our Torah study, let's pray together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshenu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. This week's Torah portion introduces the Shema, the great Hebrew prayer of the Jewish people. The first verse of the Shema from the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy is among the best known in all of Jewish liturgy. Deuteronomy 6:4, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The Shema is a special kind of Hebrew prayer because it's an affirmation and a declaration. However, it's not a blessing or a petition or a request. In fact, Yeshua called it a commandment, the most important commandment. Let me read to you from Mark chapter 12, starting in verse 28. Now, one of the scribes had come up and heard a debate, noticing how well Yeshua had answered them. He asked Yeshua, which commandment is the most important of all? Verse 29, Yeshua replied, this is the most important. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. So those are the words of Yeshua. This is the most important, he says. It's the first and the foremost of all the commands. Yeshua's answer includes the Shema in the first line of the Ve'ahavta. He quotes from our Torah reading this week, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5 is what he's quoting. The Shema is the first verse, Deuteronomy 6:4. The Ve'ahavta is the second verse, Deuteronomy 6:5. And I think it's good to think of them together. It raises a question, what makes them a commandment? Well, there are a couple of ways that it's a commandment. Shema means listen or hear, and it's a command to listen to the Lord and to take to heart what he says and then to act on what he says. All of that's contained in the one word in Hebrew, Shema. And then Ve'ahavta, this also means love. It's a command, you shall love. It's a command to love the Lord with all your heart and soul and strength. So we can put those together. These commands are commands to listen to the Lord and to love him. This two-part command is directed to all of us and to each one of us. So it is a prayer, it's an affirmation, and it's also a commandment. We're going to take some time tonight to study the Shema from several different angles. We'll read it again in Hebrew and English. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The next part of the Shema prayer that we want to consider is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, all your strength. And it goes on to say that we should have these words, which I command you this day, be upon your heart. We'll get back to that in a minute. The Shema is the first prayer a Jewish child learns, and it's a good tradition to recite it in the morning and in the evening. It also may be the last prayer a Jew speaks during his or her lifetime. I can tell you that we have seen God use the Shema to awaken Jewish souls. Many times when Sandy and I were ministering in the former Soviet Union, we would sing or recite the Shema together with others, and it touched Jewish souls in amazing ways. I remember old Jewish people who said they heard the Shema just then and remembered long ago hearing the Shema at their grandparents' home when they were little children. And then they grew up during Soviet atheism and they hadn't heard it for many, many years. And then when they heard it right then with us, their Jewish soul was awakened. Sometimes believers heard the Shema and were touched so deeply, they wanted to become part of the Messianic movement and serve the Lord in a Messianic congregation. The Shema is an affirmation. It's a declaration of important truths. There is one God, and He alone is God. We will have no other gods. And so that helps us understand there are false gods, and we separate ourselves from false gods, from false beliefs, false ideals, from idols, and everything else that could pull us away from the one true God. The Shema is also a call to undivided loyalty and allegiance to God. As Michelle Allen likes to say, it's a call to being all in. We're called to be all in, wholehearted. The one true God demands the whole of mankind, all that we are, wholehearted and sincere. And we say these things when we're praying the Shema, reciting the Shema. We say these things with sincerity from our heart. They're not magic words. However, they really are powerful for us. And we take these words to heart. They shape us. We combine these words so that we have awe and love. You shall love the Lord your God. So our respect for God is joined with our love for God. The passage in Deuteronomy 6 continues, and have these words which I command you this day be upon your heart. So, Mishpacha, they shall be upon our heart. The heart, someone wrote, is conceived as a table on which these divine words shall be inscribed. The prophet Jeremiah tells us more about that in Jeremiah chapter 31. We have taught about this recently, and I think it's important to remind ourselves and to really get these details deep within us. Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, a covenant they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. But this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my Torah in their minds and inscribe it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will each man teach his neighbor or his brother, saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares the Lord, for I will forgive their iniquities and will remember their sins no more. This renewed covenant, Brit HaChadashah, is written upon our hearts. It's something that we internalize, and it stays deep within us. It's not just external rules and regulations. And with sincerity, we pray with genuine feeling and thought. These aren't just words to say. We don't just go through the motions, but we take this really seriously. Robert Alter, a great scholar, writes in Hebrew that the heart includes both our understanding and our feelings. And that in Hebrew, the soul is the essential self, our essence. It's not like a dualist division of body and soul, but a united, integrated being. And in this passage, he points out that the Hebrew word for strength is ma'od, and here it's used as a noun, though typically it's an adverb that means very or very much. So you could say something like this: I love you very much, or we are to love the Lord very much, or we're to love the Lord very, or as we like to laugh and say, such much. Loving God with our heart and soul and strength, that is a way of describing being all in. One of our traditions is to stand and turn towards Jerusalem when we recite the Shema. And I want to share several scriptures that influence us to do this. When Solomon dedicated the Jerusalem temple, he prayed, and it's in 2 Chronicles 6, verse 21, and then another verse in just a moment. Verse 21, hear the supplications of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. Hear from heaven, your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive. So these are prayers to the Lord. 2 Chronicles 6, verse 38. And when they return to you with all their heart and soul in the land of the enemies who took them captive, and when they pray in the direction of the land that you gave to their fathers, the city you have chosen, and the house I have built for your name. So here it is at the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem that Solomon is praying that there will be a time when people, Jewish people, are scattered in many different places for different reasons throughout the world, and that they will turn to the Lord and they will pray in the direction of Jerusalem, in the direction of Israel, in the direction of the very place, Mount Zion, where the Holy Temple was built. Daniel 6, verse 10 also speaks of this. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done in earlier times. The Shema passage in Deuteronomy 6 continues with some additional instructions. Deuteronomy 6, verse 7. Teach them diligently to your children and speak of them about the commands of the Lord. Speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you retire, and when you arise. Now, let me give you a little linguistic language. There is a linguistic lesson. There is a term, merism. It's merism. It means 2 opposing terms and then everything in between. And so there's a reference in a merism to like one endpoint and another endpoint. In this case, you've got in your house and when you're walking somewhere. And so the merism is helping us to see where are we to pray and where are we to speak of these things that the Lord has taught us. Where? And the answer is everywhere, in your house and when you're walking. And then the 2 terms, when you retire, and what that means when you lie down, and when you arise, when you get up from your bed. And so that answers the question, when? And you've got these 2 opposing terms, so it means every time, always. So where? Everywhere. When? Always. And I think these thoughts are echoed in several New Testament scriptures. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 17 says, pray without ceasing. Or you could put it this way, don't stop praying. And then the next verse, 1 Thessalonians 5:18, give thanks in every circumstance, for this is the will for you and in Messiah Yeshua. And then I like this one translation of Philippians 4:6, sort of a modern take on it. Don't worry about anything, but pray about everything. Or maybe an older, more familiar translation, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Now I want to turn to a very recent court ruling that I think connects to what we've been learning about the Shema and the Ve'ahavta. We've been concerned, as you know, and praying about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on college campuses. Hamas and other terrorist groups have been working for decades to develop a strong presence on college campuses in the United States and in other countries, and to influence students and professors. Their strategy is to delegitimize Israel as a country and to spread anti-Semitism at the same time. So they had been using what is called the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. They launched that long ago in order to attack Israel as if Israel is an apartheid state that should be treated in the most terrible ways. And together with the BDS movement, now they've launched new initiatives. And after the Hamas pogrom on October 7th, they've all been joined together. The pro-Palestinian student encampments on college campuses were the public face of their new efforts. Those pro-Palestinian protests, you know, the ones where they're shouting from the river to the sea. And what that means is no Jews, no Israel in that land. Those pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses were designed to stir up animosity and hostility against Jewish students and everyone who supports the state of Israel. So I want to tell you about some recent and I think important developments. And I think it's timely for us as we're reading in the Torah about the Shema. The Shema has been one of the great public prayer affirmations of Jewish people. During times of persecution, Jews have faced the threat of death or violence and recited the Shema, spoken the Shema, rather than renounce their Jewishness or the Lord. And so the Shema is associated with martyrdom and sacrifice in Jewish history, and also with being courageous and standing up. There are times when Jewish people began to pray the Shema, and it was their last words before they were beaten or tortured or killed. And here we are this week reading the Torah portion where the Shema is introduced, and I think it's timely. Not only has it been the prayer of Jewish martyrs, it's been the prayer of Jewish faith. That's important to everyone who believes in Yeshua the Messiah. I say this because Yeshua said that the Shema was the most important commandment in all the Torah, the most important. I've also been teaching you about the connection between our love of God and our love for Israel and the Jewish people and our love of Messiah. These commitments of love are foundational, and their connection should always remain strong and important to us. As disciples of Yeshua, we hold fast to all these commitments, just as the apostles did. Our love for Israel, our stand with Israel, our stand for the state of Israel, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, it's all based on the religious beliefs and commitments that we have as disciples of Yeshua. And we do have additional non-religious commitments and understandings that strengthen our position because we understand some things about history and about persecution against Jewish people, about anti-Semitism, about the Holocaust and pogroms against the Jews. And as well, we have understanding as Americans of our constitutional rights to freedom of religion. That's also important. So I want to read to you some excerpts from several news articles from the last couple of days that describe a court ruling in California this week, as well as some excerpts from the ruling itself. And here's some background. It's just a few words from an Associated Press news article. A federal judge ruled on Tuesday that the University of California, Los Angeles, that's UCLA, folks, cannot allow pro-Palestinian protesters to block Jewish students from accessing classes and other parts of campus. The article says the preliminary injunction marks the first time a U.S. judge has ruled against a university over the demonstrations against the Israel-Hamas war on college campuses earlier this year. U.S. District Judge Mark Scarsi's ruling came in a lawsuit filed in June by 3 Jewish students at UCLA. The students alleged that they experienced discrimination on campus during the protest because of their faith, and that UCLA failed to ensure access to campus for all Jewish students. So that's from an Associated Press article, and I read the ruling today in its entirety. I just want to read a few excerpts. And the opening statement in the ruling by Judge Scarsi, I think, is powerful. This is what it reads. In the year 2024, in the United States of America, in the state of California, in the city of Los Angeles, Jewish students were excluded from portions of the UCLA campus because they refused to denounce their faith. This fact is so unimaginable and so abhorrent to our constitutional guarantee of religious freedom that it bears repeating. Jewish students were excluded from portions of the UCLA campus because they refused to denounce their faith. Those are the opening words of the ruling. That's what the judge wrote in his ruling. And then it goes on, and he mentioned some background, and it really helps us understand his integrity as a judge. At the outset, he writes, the court notes that this case does not litigate the merits of the armed conflict in Gaza or the merits of protest or counter-protest movements responding thereto. So the judge put that in because he's being very precise. And then the ruling cites several important facts. And as I was reading these, I have to tell you, it just took my breath away. Some of these facts are just so troubling and really so outrageous. I'm really glad that the judge included these facts in the ruling. This is what he wrote. Protesters established checkpoints and required passersby to wear a specific wristband to cross them. News reporting indicates that the encampment's entrances were guarded by protesters, and people who supported the existence of the state of Israel were kept out of the encampment. Plaintiffs are 3 Jewish students who assert they have a religious obligation to support the Jewish state of Israel. Let me comment on this part of the ruling, these details. People who supported the existence of the state of Israel were kept out of the encampment, and they were forbidden to go into the parts of the campus, of UCLA campus, because of that. And that was really outrageous in the eyes of the judge. It's outrageous to me. I'm just thankful that Judge Scarsi identified this in really pinpoint accuracy. With pinpoint accuracy, he described what was going on. Can you imagine just supporting the state of Israel is enough to be discriminated against? That was the case. And I want you to understand why that was the case. It's because Hamas is trying to delegitimize the state of Israel. They want anyone like you or like me who supports the existence of the state of Israel to be how can you put it, to be silenced, to be put into a condition of fear and intimidation. That is the goal. And for that reason, I think it's really important that these 3 UCLA students went to court and they had lawyers who argued for their protection in a really powerful and effective way. Now, let me read to you just a few lines from the New York Times article I read about this. The New York Times says Judge Scarsi said that UCLA had argued that it has no responsibility to protect the religious freedom of its Jewish students because the exclusion was engineered by third-party protesters. But Judge Scarsi said it did not matter who blocked the students. Lawyers for the students said the injunction was the first in the nation against what they called an anti-Semitic encampment. A public university is not allowed to have facilities and parts of campus that are closed off to Jews, Mark Rienzi, a lawyer for the students, said Wednesday in an interview with the New York Times. You're just not allowed to run a campus where you have a Jew-free quad any more than you'd have a black-free quad or a woman-free quad. So, Mishpachah, those are the details from the ruling and from the news articles. I think it's important for us to be informed and to pay attention. And to tell you the truth, as awful, horrendous, abhorrent as these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protests have been, I'm encouraged by Judge Scarsi's ruling. And Mishpachah, we need encouragement, don't we? We need to take these things to heart. We take the Shema to heart. We should also take encouragement to heart in every victory. I think this is a ruling of great significance and weight in support of Jews and our support of the state of Israel and our religious protections under the Constitution of the United States of America. I hope that you also believe that you have a religious obligation to support the Jewish state of Israel. And I also hope that you believe that you have the religious freedom to do it. I hope you have courage to stand together with Israel and the Jewish people. As we like to say, be strong, be brave and courageous, and may we strengthen one another. Chazak, chazak, v'nid chazak. I want to end this time with two useful traditional Hebrew prayers that are based on Scripture. One comes from Psalm 19, verse 14, Yehi leratzonim refi, v'higion lebi lifanecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. And from Zechariah chapter 14, verse 9, this great prayer, V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz b'yom hahu yiyeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad. This prayer is really a prophecy. It's a prophetic declaration that we allow our hearts to be encouraged by from Zechariah 14:9. It has been prophesied, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day, the Lord shall be one, and his name one. And we say amen. Mishpachah, I want to remind you that we have Shabbat school for our children this Saturday during our Shabbat service time after our worship. It's a great time to come with your children and grandchildren and worship together as families. And I do encourage you to join us in person on Saturday in our synagogue sanctuary in Jacksonville, Florida. If you can't make it in person, please join us by live stream or later by podcast. We're going to close with Aaron's blessing, but first, would you consider standing with us financially? If this live stream is a blessing to you, or if our Messianic Jewish Teachings podcast or our sanctuary services are a blessing to you, would you consider blessing our ministry? All the information can be found on our webpage, bethisraelnow.com/giving. And now let's close with Aaron's blessing. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you, and may the Lord protect you. May the Lord cause the light of his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his face to you and give you his peace. In the name of Yeshua, the Prince of Peace. So from Sandy and me and the entire Beth Israel team, thanks for joining us. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.